Hola, rompereglas. It's Isha, and I wanted to use this video to help you understand what I mean when I talk about the shadow self or the unconscious self. So I'm just going to share how I see it. Other people define it differently, so feel free to look at how other people define it as well. I prefer the term unconscious self, even though I'm more used to talking about shadow self. I think of unconscious self as being less loaded and scary than shadow, but sometimes I use it just because that's what everybody else uses it, and it's easier for people to know what I'm referring to. So basically, the unconscious self is the disowned and repressed parts of our larger self. Um, it includes taboo desires, thoughts, intentions, ideals, and usually ones we don't like. So what's inside the unconscious self? Well, there's cruelty, there's fear, there's terror, there's misalignment, destructiveness, victimhood, arrogance, rage, withholding, hoarding, pride, the desire to be special or better than, and even addictions have roots in the shadow. So we all have unconscious self. So in hearing that list, I don't want you to get all freaked out and think that you're a bad person, because we all have it. And in fact, my kids have shadow, and everybody comes in with the potential to develop shadow. And I'll speak more a little bit about how it develops. So the unconscious self, right? We all have it. And if you want to know what's in your unconscious, think about the characteristics that you dislike most in other people, right? Like I don't like it when people are judgmental or or greedy. And I can be judgmental and greedy, and I don't really like those parts of myself so much, and I'm learning to love them. But it's a good indication nonetheless as to what's in there. And if you're a parent, uh, you'll have a good sense of what your shadow is, because it'll be exactly what annoys you to death about your children. So we all have parts of us, even with the best parenting, we all have parts of us that were unseen, unappreciated, maybe actively disliked or even punished. So, and a big part of what keeps the unconscious out of our awareness is shame. So, most of us live in a divided sense, right? We live divided because there's a whole part of our life force that we're not using, or that is compressed, stuck in a drawer somewhere, right? And so our life's work is about taking those things out of the drawer and incorporating it into our wholeness, like bringing it all together and unifying it, becoming whole, right? That's exactly what healing is just becoming whole again. So I'm gonna drink. So how does the unconscious form? Well, it happens in relationship, right? And it happens through interactions with our immediate family system. It happens in group, right? Our group identifications. It happens as part of our socialization and conditioning, right? So I'm going to give you some examples. So examples of developmental trauma in a family system. So you are born of Eros, right? And you possess all the life force energy in your small body, right? In your little newborn body. And your caregivers, as much as they love you, they have limitations on their time, their patience, their emotional capacity. And so there are parts of your energy that may not be fully welcome. For example, there may be no room to bring your anger into that relationship, or your hurt, right? Some kids express really loudly and really big, and that might be really hard for parents to hear, right? So they might want to just shut it down or just make it stop. right? And when we bring these hurt or angry parts to, your caregiver, and you realize your attachment to that caregiver is threatened, you decide, and of course not consciously, but there's a decision that is made in the energy body to repress and compartmentalize this energy so that you can continue to be cared for, right? That's sort of the more benign way it develops. And so you put anger, or you put rage, or can't think of it right now. The part of you that withholds, or whatever. You put it in a drawer and you mark it unacceptable and you close it forever, right? And so you lose that part. You're not using that part of your life force energy. So another more extreme example is when there's active abuse in the home, and a child has a parent who is either cruel or cold with their love and their punishments. And in that fear, helplessness, and confusion, the child will develop strategies, just survival strategies, such as closing down their heart, like collapsing into a victimhood state, or feeling, or rage, right? In order to not feel the vulnerability of being hurt and not being loved adequately. So that's a trauma scenario. And of course, there's systemic scenarios where, um, people of color, women, are, people who are not able-bodied, are sent messages, thousands of messages a day, that they're not enough and that they're not good enough, that there's something wrong with them, or that they should be quiet, or that they should be around, or that they don't matter. So that's also ways that we absorb messages that shut us down, shut down some of this beautiful big life force that we're all born with. And because we live in a world, a binary world of good and evil, we go through great lengths to avoid the unconsciousness in our healing work, generally speaking, right? We prefer to stay in our mask of goodness, or our competence, or the ways that we're powerful. And the unconscious self is usually a really, really delicate, protected place. And to transform it, you have to really be willing to feel the pain and discomfort, right? It's uncomfortable. But this, it turns out, can also be pleasurable. And I'll get to that in a second. I just want to mention, what people are noticing, because it seems to be happening a lot in different communities, is that, this unconscious part of us is a much stronger co-creator than we give it credit. In fact, about like 90% of our lives are run by subconscious materials, intentions, desires, etc. For example, like most conflicts in your life and in your relationships are based on your relationship to your unconscious, right? It's the relationship that you have to that part of yourself that determines how conflict shows up in your life and in your relationships. That's not to say like things don't happen, but even the ways we respond to them come from the unconscious self. So the more we become intimate with our unconscious, the more it can come to consciousness, and the better our lives, our relationship can be, because we are creating from the awareness of these parts of ourselves, right? If I'm aware that I can be withholding, then I can notice when I'm withholding and then do the opposite, right? If I choose to do that. So back to the pleasure piece for a second. If we can compassionately accept the unconscious as just parts where we got hurt, we are then able to integrate it into our whole and unified being, right? It's not scary. It doesn't make us bad. It's just parts of us that got hurt. And why is it important to integrate? Because remember, the unconscious is repressed energy. It's part of your life force. And there's pleasure that lives there, right? When we don't unify the unconscious with and integrate it, then we're gonna want to get pleasure in ways that are not cool. We're going to try to get pleasure by being mean or cold or withholding or self-destructive, right? That's what's going to feel good to us. And so we want to put pleasure in its rightful place so that we don't harm ourselves and harm other people, right? And when there's pleasure that's repressed, it comes out in service of domination or powerlessness, right? And we heal the unconscious or shadow by moving through the emotions. The more you repress, the more it comes out sideways, right? We see this example in, let's say, religious leaders who condemn homosexuality, but then are caught at the neighborhood BDSM bar, and it wants to be expressed again because it's your life force. It wants to become conscious and it wants to be unified, right? It's like it's the body's way of just naturally wanting to be whole. And what's fascinating is that when you move towards things that feel good, such as intimacy, self-love, and pleasure, it can bring up, like it can reveal parts of the unconscious self, like blockages to what you consciously want. And you notice like, oh, I really want this, but I'm noticing how afraid I am to have it, right? So pleasure practices are, unconscious / shadow work, right? Because you're working through scarcity. Intimacy can be shadow or unconscious work. You're working through sexual shame. Self-love can be shadow or unconscious work because you're working through personal shame, right? You're meeting yourself and you're meeting all parts of you, right? And when you can accept these unconscious parts of yourself and just be in a relationship with them, not a relationship that is judgmental, but simply an accepting, maybe compassionate relationship, you can actually play with them and transform them into energies that serve the healing of the collective unconscious. And so that's what we're going to be doing at Alchemyze, which is the movement practice that I've set up for October 1st at 8 p.m. Eastern. And it's an opportunity for us to work with the elements, to work with aspects of our personality that are repressed. Perhaps there's a part of you that is cruel. Maybe there's a part of you that wants to just push other people away. Maybe there's a seductress in you, and maybe there's like a child addict in you. So it's an opportunity to play with those parts in like a sacred sisterhood space. So I hope you can join us at Alchemyze on October 1st at 8 p.m. Eastern, and you can sign up with the link in your email. All right. Bye-bye. Adios.